You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, you're listening to Sustainably Geeky, episode 68. Today we're going to be talking about food production with Andrew Johnston, who is the produce category manager at Willy Street Co-op, which is in Madison, Wisconsin. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge. I guess, can you start by telling us how you came to work in this field and specifically your position, your current position?
Yeah, well, let's see, I started with the co-op in 1992, so I was a student at the university and was hanging out with some friends, and one of them had just gotten a job at the co-op, and they were like, "Oh, it's such a cool place." Um, and so I got a job in the produce department there, and I actually really liked it. I had grown up in a rural community in central Wisconsin and had worked on uh, farms there seasonally in the summertime, so had some background in agriculture, and this just, it was interesting, to see this different side, the other end of the supply chain, so to speak. And certainly, uh, you know, I think working in a co-op, being introduced into a co-op at that time was also very interesting. We had one store. I think we had roughly 35, maybe 40 employees. And, today we have 3 retail sites, a central office, production kitchen, 450 employees. So a little bit different back then. But
Well, it sounds like you've seen on the co-op through a lot of changes, so this will be a good
yeah,
insight into
yeah,
how that model works, as well as kind of the changes you've seen through the years in the food system, I
yeah.
think. So let's talk about the traditional quote unquote model of food production in the US as it currently stands, and increasingly as we're seeing around the world. What does this look like, and is this how it's always been structured?
Well, I don't think it's always been structured how it is. Currently, it's, centralized, Southern California, the Central Valley, large farms, huge farms, miles and miles of farmland, um, low cost labor, um, not very diversified, with centralized distribution. California's producing just tremendous amounts of fresh fruits and vegetables getting distributed across the entire United States. Um, for some crops, it's 100% of what you see in the grocery store: grapes, avocados, spinach, lettuce, greens. They're all coming out of California. Um,
Yeah, so it sounds like what we have is a lot of big farms producing the majority of the food, whereas maybe in the past it was more smaller farms or people growing their own food and a little more localized. Is that pretty
yeah,
accurate?
I think that is correct. You had um, areas around New York City that supplied New York City with food. All of the major metropolitan areas were supplied most likely with fresh fruits and vegetables from around that region. You know, um, and certainly when we think about population growth, that land becomes incredibly expensive, very difficult to continue to farm when you can make a living selling your land, um, and also just having enough acreage to supply that demand and a workforce to do it. I mean, California historically, they have a skilled workforce who have been doing it for 200 years since the Spanish came in. They have been using that indigenous labor almost as slave labor. So hard to compete with that.
Well, and even today, a lot of the workers, unfortunately, are undocumented or, not making a living wage. So that is a whole other issue as to why food is as cheap as it is. It's not really the true cost of what we're getting.
Right, exactly. So.
Well, you've kind of touched on my next question, but why and how did we shift to the current model that we have? I know you said kind of population growth and land availability, but are there other factors that maybe led to these mega farms growing, 1 or 2 crops each?
Well, I would like to think that it was really just, a desire to improve. I don't think they were thinking very far ahead, as in, like monocropping and all the effects of that. I think they were really looking and saying, like, hey, how can we supply a nation with food at a reasonable cost? And if you look back at the 40s and 50s and 60s, the advancements in technology, for better or for worse, you had technologies that came out of World War II, and they applied that into agriculture, whether it be mechanical equipment, herbicides, pesticides. They had all of these new tools that they could utilize, and they applied them to agriculture. And I think that's part of the reason there was a big shift. I think the land, a lot of it was being farmed. Maybe smaller farms. More independently owned. But again, there were opportunities there where even those farms saw it as an opportunity to, hey, well, I can be a part of this larger branded operation, and I'll plant and I'll cultivate, and they'll come in and harvest and market my product for me. So, I really think it was about, taking advantage of some of the technologies and opportunities that just were there at that time.
Do you think that advancements in refrigeration and just personal cooking methods in general played a role in that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a pretty broad topic. I think when you look historically back there, and TV dinners, I mean, that was a big thing. You were doing well if you were eating TV dinners. If you were opening a can of beans and like those things, society as a whole, I think we saw a greater shift into urban areas. We saw an increase of women going into the workforce and having careers. There was a desire to have, I guess, more convenience in your food, and certainly frozen food, canned food, refrigeration technology. I mean, they went from being small, inefficient, and not everybody even owned them, probably up until, I don't know, mid-century, which seems crazy, but it's true.
Well, now we're so spoiled with choice, and like we don't have to think about, is this in season? Can we get it?
Right.
Now we can get anything anytime. I mean, you could go to the store and get an orange any time of the year, and the past
and
that was a novelty.
we have that expectation as consumers, right?
Yeah.
Where if we want to eat strawberries in January, we can eat strawberries in January. And if
Hmm.
we want to eat citrus in the middle of summer, well, it's, we can,
Yeah.
and it's coming from the southern hemisphere. Um, but that's the expectation that we have. So,
Yeah. It's definitely going to take a mind shift to get away from that if we want to eat more locally, I think, and
absolutely.
not feel like a sacrifice that we're giving up these things.
Yeah.
When you eat them when they're seasonal, it's more like a treat almost.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from my experience, which I find very interesting. Bananas. You look at those crops that are either tropical or are extremely seasonal, and very dependent on a specific climate. Those are the top selling items in the produce category, not just at the Willie Street Co-op, but across the entire country. Bananas, table grapes, avocados. Top three items in the produce department, which for almost all of us, they're not produced locally at all, you know? So it's just interesting.
Like you said, we've created a monster in some ways.
Yeah, we have,
um,
you know?
well, so you kind of spoke to this earlier, but when we talk about large scale farming and the justification for it is that it's more productive, it increases
Yeah,
productivity and the ability to grow more crops. Is this actually the case in the long run when you think about, one, all of the inputs you have to put into those systems to keep them going, whereas a more natural system kind of does a lot of that itself?
yeah,
And two, the fact that maybe we're producing crops that are less resistant and then they end up either going extinct or dying out
yeah,
because
yeah.
a pest hits them or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jennifer, I think, if you look at it in its simplest terms, you've got your inputs and your outputs. And if your inputs are significantly less than your outputs, then that is productivity, d- from an economics definition. Um, and I think that there is some truth to that. Certainly, certainly there are efficiencies that you gain, um, but as you were saying, they come with a cost. Over the long term, um, and I don't know that that the industry was looking that far ahead, and when they shifted to this model, I don't know that they were thinking about that. They were thinking strictly about productivity, efficiencies. Certainly there was probably financial gains to be had there, which was likely a motivator in this as well.
So, as we learn about some of these long-term consequences and just the benefits of more localized food systems from the terms of emissions released when they're transported, and the labor and the economics and everything, it seems like there has been more of a focus on shifting back to kind of a more small scale food production. Are you seeing that, or can you speak to why this may or may not be happening, and kind of any trends you've seen in that area?
Yeah. Well, I think you're correct. I think there is, and my observation is, I think one, like, consumers kind of shifted away from that processed TV dinner, canned beans, wanted fresh product. Um, I think advances in technology, mostly in communications, right? We've got our cell phones, we've got the Food Network, we've got all these magazines and publications, just so much access to information, um, that 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 value of what good food is. It kind of started pretty slow there in the 80s and picked up steam in the 90s, and by the early 2000s, you know, just how we were preparing our food, everything changed. I mean, I grew up, I was a, product of the 70s and 80s, and my mom boiled asparagus till it was gray and stringy, and I mean, we would never consider eating that now, you know. Um, so I think that shift to, in what we valued in food, um, you know, s- I think that was the impetus there, and I think that people recognized that, and there were opportunities. Um, a lot of the farms that I work with, um, they have been, well, they started in the late 70s, early 80s when they saw those opportunities. Um, and, it just grew from there. Farmers markets. I think Dane County in Madison, where I live, we have one of the biggest farmers markets in the United States. I mean, it's amazing. There's hundreds and hundreds of producers, and people love that. Like, you can go, you can get really fresh product. You get different varieties than you'd see in the grocery store, and it's just incredible. You know, so I think there's that demand, that value of the local product being fresh, just being exceptional quality. That's what people, you know, they've grown to want that. You know. I think a lot of people also have a better understanding of the implications of the large scale farms, right? Um, again, we've got access to information so much more than we had 30 years ago. Um, that we've just, we've become more educated about that, and uh, as we've had more choices, we've gravitated to incorporate more locally produced food into into our food chain. um and from an environmental footprint point, I think that there's arguments for both sides there, right? If you have 40 different small farms running trucks all over the place versus an entire semi loaded with apples, one product. It, I've read different articles about the efficiencies there, and I think it goes both ways. Um, but I do think that there definitely a lot of value in supporting a more local food system. Overall, I think the benefits outweigh um, the cons.
Yeah, and I think there's, from a consumer standpoint, like a novelty to being involved in the food production, even if
Oh yeah.
you're just going to a farmer's market, but you're meeting the person that grew your food. Or
Oh
you
yeah.
can go to the farm directly sometimes and pick your own apples and pumpkins
Absolutely.
and
You
grow.
can
Or
volunteer.
yeah, so I think the trend in that area is promising because people are excited about being
Oh,
a part of the
absolutely.
process and growing their
Absolutely.
own food, even if it's a measly little garden that doesn't give you anything but
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
stress.
Absolutely. When I first started at Willy Street Co-op, we had a volunteer program, and members could sign up for volunteer shifts. Oh, it was so long ago, I can't remember what their benefit was. They got like a discount, like a 20% discount or a 10% discount. Um, but talk about a great way to be involved and develop a better understanding of where your food is coming from. Oh, it was awesome. Uh, Illegal, which is why we don't do it anymore. Um, but you know, that was the co-op way back then.
Well, and I love that there are so many community gardens cropping up now. You know, where I'm
Yeah,
from in Texas, they started a couple of community gardens that give the food away to the local community, to the folks that help work it.
yeah,
And you probably don't even have to work it, honestly. You just, if you need it, they'll give it to you. But it's nice to see that some of the vacant space in these cities and communities is being used for something productive like that. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring that up. Preparing for this, I was thinking about city planning. And honestly, if we had the foresight dedicating land use for agriculture, I think that,
rooftop gardens, yeah, there's
yeah,
so much potential there in the cities too.
yeah, yeah. You know, um, I think we missed some opportunities. We just didn't have the foresight then.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
but
maybe now as people are becoming more aware of these things and the need is increasing with the growing population. I mean, we've got to figure out ways to grow food that doesn't tie up acres and acres of land, whether it's hydroponics or vertical growing or, rooftop gardens or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there if people just,
yeah,
put their minds to
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, uh, I see a lot of those products mm, become available, and it's challenging. I think applying the technology. We had talked about it, about how large scale farming kind of became the norm, and talking about cost of equipment and whatnot. And I think when we talk about some of the urban greenhouses and whatnot that are, they're incredibly, they're utilizing technology that is incredibly expensive. I mean, these places are all run, not all of them, but they're using AI. They're controlling temperature, moisture, light. Everything is just, it's unreal. Like, you really don't need a lot of human labor there, other than to harvest and pack the product. Because otherwise, it's everything is just, it's all computerized. You know, and you see that a lot with the equipment on these larger farms as well. It's really incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I saw an article recently that said John Deere is partnering with Starlink to hook up all of their tractors to the Starlink system. And I was like, a tractor is hooked up to satellites now. Like, who knew that was even a thing that was
yeah,
needed? But,
yeah.
living in the
Well, and
future.
we talk about like the large scale agriculture, but that they're hooking that tractor up to the satellite to help prevent soil compaction, right? So that tractor isn't taking the same route every year when it's harvesting or whatever. It's interesting. It is. It's really interesting to learn about those things and see how they're applying that technology. Again, I think the industry is becoming more aware of all of those challenges, be it pesticide use, herbicides, soil compaction, erosion, all of that, on the large scale. It's really the small farmers who brought that to the public's attention, and I think the demand for a product that people place a higher value on, right? I mean, we talk about value, and 30 years ago it was the price. And now when we talk about value, we're talking about the quality of the product, the environmental footprint, what level of inclusivity um, is the company striving for. There's all of these other components that factor into that value, right? And it's just, we didn't have that years ago. That just wasn't a thing. It was, eh, I can get cheap produce, and that's what I value.
Well, I'm really glad you framed it that way, because I know, yeah, a lot of people look at food and just think, what can I get cheap? But
Yeah,
yeah, you're not getting a lot of times the nutritional content, or
right.
you're paying for, you know, basically someone that's not getting paid. So when you start thinking of it in a way of, okay, am I supporting an ethical company? Am I supporting someone who's local and giving back to the community? Yeah, there comes a point where you're like, why is it for a dollar, or for a euro for this,
Yeah,
vegetable that's clearly worth more than that? You got to start wondering, what's going on behind the scenes. And a lot of the times in the U.S., especially, the food is very superficially low because of government subsidies and things like that encourage things to be grown that probably shouldn't be grown. But that's a whole other.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's not really, my area of expertise there. I think that probably is more, commodity crops, where you're looking at corn and wheat and soy, stuff like that, subsidized by the government. Um, I was reading an article this morning. Um, they were talking about weather, freezing weather in California, in northern Mexico, in the desert. Um, but basically just saying, it's supply and demand for the fresh vegetable market, because it's not subsidized by government. So whatever, they can sell it for as low as they want, or they can sell it for as high as they want.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of inputs into that stuff that you
Oh
have
my
to think
gosh.
about.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've talked about kind of the large scale farming and then the small scale farming, but I'd like to hear more about the co-op model. I know that's not directly how the food is produced, but it's how the food is a lot of times, gets to the consumer,
Yeah.
and it's a different model from either the farmer's market or the grocery store that you
Yeah.
think of. So can you talk about what that looks like? How is it different from, other sorts of stores or ways of getting food out to consumers?
Yeah. 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 Well, it's interesting because in some aspects it's very similar to a regular grocery store, right? So, um, or the larger food system. It's just that it's a much smaller scale. So I think on the large food system, you have, huge retailers, the Walmarts, the Targets, Kroger's, uh, contracting with, Driscoll Strawberry or Driscoll Berry Farms, and saying, we're going to buy this and we're going to pay this price for it. Working directly with small local growers. Um, we sit down every year with all of the growers independently, ask them if there's any changes to the farm, um, to their crop lineup. Um, and then we go through the list of products that we've purchased. We make agreements so that they can plan, and they know that Willie Street is, we're going to buy whatever product it is that we agreed on. We're going to buy that from them, and we do our best to, maybe provide them with, an average of, we're good for 10 cases of kale each week, or 100 cases of broccoli, whatever it is, so that they can plan for that. We do also work with distributors, because we need to sell grapes, we need to sell bananas, things that, don't grow in our area. But if it's available seasonally, locally, we prioritize that, and we work directly with those farms. We set up order delivery schedules with them so they know, yep, um, you can expect to see our orders whenever whatever day it is and by whatever time you need them by. And then we have that expectation that we'll see that delivery whenever, whatever day we agreed upon, because it's really a two-way relationship, right? It's good for us, to have that local product. It differentiates us from other retailers, um, and it's also good for them, right? Like, our businesses go hand in hand. When one of us is doing well, the other one hopefully is doing well. um, and it's really about, a high level of communication. um, in the bigger picture, if you look store wide, um, we packaged grocery, if we're talking about like cereal and canned goods, we're working with, um, a larger distributor there, um, and a group, an organization called NCG, which is National Cooperative Grocers. Um, and that organization kind of acts similarly to like the Walmart or the Target for all co-ops that are members of that organization. So they go out and they negotiate cost. And if you're a member of, NCG, you're buying that product. They work with the distributor, so you're buying that product from the distributor. The cost has already been agreed upon. They set up promotions, all of that. So in a way, similar, just a smaller scale. And again, it's, the benefit of pooling our resources together as co-ops across the country that enables us to stay competitive, right? Because when you go into a grocery store today, it doesn't matter what grocery store you go into, there are products that align with our product line. It might be a different label, but you've got organic black beans, you've got organic pastas, you've got organic yogurt. I mean, you see those products everywhere. And, it's, we, we have to be somewhat competitive. Otherwise we'll just lose that customer base. But it's the local aspect, I think, that really differentiates us. And even for those packaged goods, we do see have a lot of relationships directly with very small manufacturers here in the area, right in the Madison area. They're producing salsa, chocolates, um, you know, ice cream, stuff like that, which is great.
It sounds like a lot of the stuff you could get at a farmer's market, except you could get these every day versus having to wait till the weekend.
Yeah, and I think what benefits us, I don't know if it benefits the producers all that much, is that the larger stores don't have systems set up to work with those smaller producers. Like, they don't. They want one or two trucks coming into their loading dock, everything that store needs on those trucks. Where we have truck after truck after truck coming into our docks. So it's a little bit different.
Well, the co-op
it
model
helps differentiate us.
Yeah, it sounds like it's good for those farmers who can't necessarily compete on a national level, but still have enough product that they need a guaranteed I'm going to
Yeah.
sell this much, or
Yeah.
if I grow it, what's going to happen if it doesn't? So by partnering with
Yeah.
a co-op, they know, okay, they'll take this much of it. Maybe I'll sell this at a farmer's market, whatever, but they can kind of diversify and guarantee at least a certain
Yeah.
amount of income. And
Yeah.
then also it gives the consumer, the local options that they want, and some of the maybe national options for packaged goods or whatever, like you were saying. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's awesome. We've had relationships with some of the farms, boy, ever since I've started working there. So I think some of them have been supplying the co-op for 35 plus years. Um, and over those years, a lot of them started out at farmers markets. That's how they started their businesses. Um, then they started working with Willy Street Co-op. There were a couple other small co-ops in the Madison area at that time who also were sourcing directly from these growers. Um, and over the years to see how the different farms strategize their sales, branching out into CSA, community supported agriculture, farmers markets, retails, um, kind of seeing that and then watching them kind of level off and say, okay, well, here's what works well for my farm. We have some farms that did all three of those things and now they're only doing wholesale, or they did CSA, farmers market, and wholesale, and now they're only doing CSA and farmers market. So it's I think finding what works best for their farm. Like what is the scale of their farm? Can they reliably supply a grocery store with food? And coming to that realization of, holy moly, this is way more than I anticipated, but I can put together 300 boxes of produce once a week and I can have a CSA. So, and I can go to the farmer's market on Saturday and take whatever I didn't pack up. So I think it works good for them. And, Madison is, I don't know what the population is, but um, it's really amazing how many organic local farms are around the central Wisconsin and in Wisconsin in general. It's awesome. Like there are so many. It's unreal.
well, and I can't believe I didn't think of this before. But since you're in Wisconsin, are you guys selling a lot of dairy? And is that one of your big partnerships? Is with dairy farmers as well? I mean, since we've been mostly talking produce.
Yeah, yeah, it is
That's a selfish
actually.
question for me because I love cheese, but
Yeah. Well, of course we've got
yeah,
plenty of cheese.
yeah.
Um, that's locally produced. We do, offer a lot of. I feel like cheese has kind of become like the microbrew industry, right? There's just like small, little cheesemakers popping up everywhere. It's crazy.
Artisan.
Yeah, they've all got these artisan like cheeses that are super incredible, and um, but yes, we do work with a lot of local cheese producers, and dairy as well. There is a dairy farm. They offer both. They call it traditional and organic milk, and it's just incredible. Um, their chocolate milk is one of the best things on this planet.
Mm. Speaking my language. Well, I next time I'm in Madison, I have been a few times. I will have to check out the co-op, but I've never, unfortunately, lived in a city that had one. I do have a farmers market here, but I guess
Yeah.
I'd encourage our listeners to look for that, because sometimes maybe they've seen the co-op sign and not really known what it was, or maybe thought, oh, I have to be a member to shop there, which I guess that is a question, because some of them are membership based. Do people have to pay a membership or sign up to actually shop at this co-op?
Anybody can shop at the co-op.
Okay,
Anybody can
good
shop.
to know.
There are some benefits to membership as far as mm, you get a vote, and it's generally, I mean, realistically, members, they're not voting on every single product that we carry, but they're voting on the direction the co-op is going in, things like that. Um, they have a voice, but anybody can shop at the co-op. Sometimes you may not be privy to the good deal that's happening on a specific product unless you're a member. But we have several different promotional programs that provides benefits to membership, but also other programs that you get the sale price regardless. So, but yeah, anybody can shop at the co-op. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, again, listeners, if you are in an area with a co-op, especially Madison, check it out and see what they're about and support local. I think
yeah,
is the best the best reason to do that. Um, I guess before we move on to the green life hacks, we've talked a lot about the environmental impact of local food production and the health benefits and things like that. But what role do they play in local economies? Because a lot of times that's the only thing that matters to people is, the money.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of things going on there. You know, the co-op itself, uh, we have community reinvestment. Um, and the businesses, the local businesses, farms that we work with, it's just it's hard to pinpoint it, right? But I mean, we can say, oh yeah, they provide jobs. Yes, that money stays in our local economy. Um, but I think it's bigger than that, and maybe not as tangible as that. I think that it really provides a greater sense of community and responsibility towards each other. You know, um, so I mean that's how I see it. It's great. I mean, like I said, I've worked there for 30 years, and I've watched people come in the store with their kids, and now I'm watching their kids come in with their kids. Um, so it's great. I think that that sense of, I don't want to say belonging, but that we really, we believe in what we're doing. You know, like we're looking for something better than the status quo. So
Yeah, I love that. And I love anything that gives you a unique shopping experience. And it sounds like co-ops are definitely one of those. So,
oh yeah,
well, thank you so much for being on and talking through all of this. Do you have any resources you would
yeah.
share?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do you have any resources you'd share with our listeners if they want to learn more about food production, procurement, farming, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the Equal Exchange website is great. They do great things, fair trade, and they've got all different sorts of products. Um, but they're doing a lot of really great stuff. And you see so much negativity in the news, because that's what sells. It's what we like to see. Getting on Equal Exchange's website and just seeing that so much great stuff is happening out there. Um, so I like the Equal Exchange website, and I would encourage people to get on co-op websites. Even if you don't have a co-op in your town and you're not a member of a co-op, look up co-ops. They have great resources. They have newsletters. They do articles on producers, on production. Um, they're great.
And you mentioned fair trade. Is that the certification program for
Yeah,
the way food is produced? Okay,
yeah, fair trade.
awesome.
So there's a premium applied to that goes directly to the producers.
Good. So when people are complaining about having to pay a little extra, they know it's actually going to the folks making the food,
Yeah, and
not
the
a
great thing,
corporation.
yeah, and the great thing about equal exchange is that they there's transparency there, and they just make that very accessible. Now you can get on there and you can see what programs those communities, those growers are working with those communities, and they're deciding what to do with that money
Hmm.
as a community. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those resources. I guess we'll move on now to our Green Life hack. And this is the part of the show where we just share a tip or a product or an idea for ways that people can live more sustainably. So, Andrew, would you like to start us out?
Well, I'd say buy locally when you can and don't throw food away. Preserve it. That business, the garment industry, I think if that were lost was a business, it would be a Fortune 500 top 5 company. And food is not far behind that, which is a shame. Uh, there's so many things you can do. You can freeze, you can pickle, make jam, and it's going to be better than anything that you can go out and buy. So that's my hack.
No, I love that. I am always looking for new ways to extend the life of food if I end up with too much or um, like recently I went on a long trip and I had a bunch of milk and stuff and I was like, well, we're going to try to freeze this and see what happens because
Yeah,
either way it's going to get wasted. And it was actually okay. So I've Googled a lot of different weird things. Can I freeze this? How can I preserve this? So no, I
yeah.
love that.
And you're in Ireland?
I am in Ireland right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have much smaller fridges here, so I've had to get very creative with how I store things and
Yeah, I imagine
how much I
so.
buy. It's
Yeah.
a little difficult coming from the States. Well, my life hack is sort of related to food preservation, and that's just to use a beeswax wrap for your food
Yeah.
instead of saran wrap or foil or whatever. Um, and I have found that it works really good on cheese and veggies that you cut, and you want to
Sure.
keep half up. So it kind of lets the food breathe, but you have to experiment a little because not everything will work with it. It is cloth and it can get moldy if you,
Yep.
leave stuff in it too long, but they're kind of infinitely reusable if you take care of them. You can put more honey on them or beeswax and remelt it and have a new seal. So that's my life hack for those who are interested in trying.
And you can probably get that at your local co-op.
Exactly, yeah. Or if you're really adventurous, learn to make them yourself, but I haven't gotten that
Yes.
far yet. So
Yeah. Awesome.
awesome. Well, Andrew, thanks again for being on. Do you want to share where we can find you and or Willie Street Co-op online?
WillieStreet.coop.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
all right. Well,
And
thank you, Jennifer.
yeah, thank you. And you can find me personally on Instagram and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. You can find the show on all social media, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. So please do check us out, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, whatever they let you do. Feel free to reach out with topic suggestions or your thoughts on any of the shows. Andrew, it's so great talking with you. And for everyone listening, have a great rest of your day.
All righty. Thank you.